it's not art that I appreciate.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's different. Just because art is different doesn't mean it's bad.
Just seems like another piece of strange modern art.
I don't know what it is, but there it is.
You'll find it in every city across the country, along highways and byways, in big towns, little towns. What is it? Exactly. I'm Professor John Young. I'm a sculptor and public artist, and I'm here to answer all the questions you've ever had about public art, but were afraid to ask. Questions like, we paid for that? Whether it's in your hometown or around the world, you call that art? Well, yeah. Let's find out why. Seattle is the hip, smart city in the upper left-hand corner of your map. Usually associated with coffee and grunge music, it's also the public art capital of America. Yep, it's true, there's more public art in Seattle per capita than any other city in the US, with over 400 works you can see in the streets every day. Today we'll take a look at several neighborhoods and the art that makes them unique. Wallingford is on the northern shores of Lake Union, just north of downtown Seattle. 100-year-old craftsman bungalows and local businesses give this family-centric neighborhood a small-town feel. Wallingford is also the home of two really unique public artworks. This is the Meridian Archway by Chuck Greening. It was created in 1981. It's made out of rocks from all around the state of Washington, and it's the entryway to the park at the Good Shepherd Center. Is this an arch, a gateway, or public art? It may not seem like it at first, but this is one of the most revolutionary and evolutionary public artworks in America. And the reason is that it's incorporating a handicap ramp into it. This is the first time in history that a handicap ramp has been incorporated into a public artwork. It's completely ADA accessible. People in wheelchairs and strollers, on bicycles, they can all access the park through this sculpture.
I would be inclined to say that it's art.
And why is that?
Why is that? Because it's got this aesthetic that both fits in with the environment, but also sort of enhances the environment. It's useful. It's a handicap ramp of sort, but if it was just going to be just a handicap ramp, they could have built it much simpler. They didn't have to put so much effort into the aesthetics.
Chuck Greening's work is all about the overall design, the architectural space of this work, but also he has a fascination with details. So for example, we have a shell here, a real shell, and a cast bronze shell over here. And this project is full of these details. They're like hidden treasures. One day, Chuck and his crew were sitting down for lunch, and a dog came by. And the dog did what dogs do. And they decided to memorialize it. This is a memorial to dog poop. You call that art? Well, yeah. Who said public art can't have a sense of humor?
I live in this neighborhood and I choose to walk not down the street but purposely through this park and through this area because I enjoy it aesthetically. It's pleasing and the whole park is kind of artistic and this is part of it.
Chuck's work is full of improvisation and function. One day they were working, they sat down for a break. It was uncomfortable, so Chuck found a flat piece of stone, mortared it in, made it more comfortable, and then they made an armchair.
I definitely believe it's art.
Tell us why.
Well, look at the structure. It's gorgeous. Look at all the stones. It looks like it's an ancient mosaic thing. It's really great. We love this park.
The Meridian Archway was paid for by public funds, often referred to as Percent for Art funds, or 1% for art. When President John F. Kennedy visited Europe in the early 1960s, he saw in every city the cultural legacy of centuries of art in the public domain, fountains and statues and arches. Back home, he convinced Congress to enact a law that states that every federally funded new building or renovation must allocate 1% of its construction budget towards the acquisition of public art to be accessible to all Americans. This began the creation of our nation's public cultural heritage, now seen at federal buildings, post offices, courthouses, and tax centers. Across the nation, many municipalities, counties, and most of the states followed this example and instituted their own 1% for art laws.
But not all public art is paid for with public funds. Chuck Greening is responsible for another work on the southern edge of Wallingford. We're at the top of the hill at Gasworks Park in Seattle. We're looking at a piece by Chuck Greening called The Sundial. This was a work he did when he was only 23 years old. It's a installation environmental piece, and it's actually a functioning sundial. The first thing that you do when you come to this piece is you look at the plaque. The plaque gives you the instructions on how this is a functioning sundial. The other thing I'd like you to notice is this thumb. This is a casting of the artist's thumb. And also, it's important to know that this is privately funded public art. An anonymous donor paid for this work.
Well, we read on the plaque that you have to find the date first. So, looks like over here is our date in September.
September 2nd or so.
Yeah.
And then,
You have to stand on it.
yeah, you have to stand over the date
All
right
right.
there. And then you put your hands directly up and look at the shadow. And we have to add the hour, to add that 1 hour. And that
Why do you
puts
add
us
the hour?
For daylight savings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be just after 11 according to that, but it would actually be just after 12.
Yeah.
And then it tells you how many minutes to add.
So give me a number. What do you think it is?
Uh,
You looked at your cell
yeah, I already
phone.
looked at
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm gonna say it's about.
I'll do it again here. You can see.
All right, I'm gonna say it's about 12:15.
You're close.
Am I close?
12:05.
Oh, not
There
too
you go.
bad.
That's
Very good.
pretty accurate. Yeah.
Like the Meridian Archway, the sundial has lots of hidden treasures. For example, the white moon symbolizes winter and orange tiles represent the sunset. It's fun to explore a piece of work like this and see how many things you can find. We caught up with Chuck at the Two Bells Tavern, a watering hole for local artists.
My artwork does have a certain scale that fits the human being and how the person walks through it, participates upon it. If you go up to the Gasworks Park, you can fly a kite and ignore it. Or you can go up there and look at the detail and look at the way the sun shines on it. And the archway, as you see when you're there, people walk through it with little strollers and they don't notice it. Or other times they can go through and look at the different things going on. The scale is always within 30 to 40 feet. And it doesn't get any bigger than that and doesn't get any smaller than that, usually.
Just east of Wallingford is the University of Washington campus. Like many American universities, the UW campus is a showcase of public art. The buildings abound with traditional figurative statuary honoring our heroes. This tradition is thousands of years old and is what many people think of when they talk about art.
This is a statue of George Washington. It's a traditional figurative sculpture. It was commissioned in 1909 for the Alaska-Yukon Pacific exhibition. The artist is Laredo Taft, and the funders were the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Washington is depicted in deep contemplation, looking westward towards the horizon. His giant hand rests on a sword that becomes a symbol for the Christian cross. The details on the front of this bronze casting illustrate the experienced hand of a fine craftsman. However, Taft must have thought Washington would reside in a niche up against a wall, or perhaps he just ran out of time because the back of the sculpture looks like a lump of mashed potatoes. Poorly executed seams and just bad finishing make me think the artist never intended for anyone to view George from the rear.
This is the main plaza of the University of Washington. It's called Central Plaza, but most people know it as Red Square. This, most people know as the broken pencil thingy, but it's really the broken obelisk by Barnett Newman. It's a great example of minimalist sculpture.
The art movement that pared down a form to its basic essence, often simple geometric shapes, is known as minimalism. The artist often employed industrial materials such as painted steel for a hard-edged, machine-made look. There are no hidden details or shapes, and the viewer often has a gestalt experience because the sculpture can be understood in its entirety from any single vantage point.
This piece is made out of Cor-Ten steel, which is a kind of steel that rusts for 3 years and then stops rusting. It's also hollow, and it has a large steel rod that goes 15 feet into the ground and all the way up through the points where they kiss and beyond to the top of the sculpture, and that's the structural element that holds it all together. And then this looks like a big, thick 3-inch steel plate that's holding it up, but really it's just a fascia. It's only a 1/2 inch thick here. So there are a lot of illusions in this piece.
A higher power coming down to contact us, and it's been severed at the top. So it's symbolizing some sort of severance between us and a higher power.
Oh, very good. That's interesting.
That's my symbolic take on the sculpture.
Newman took historic traditional forms like the Egyptian obelisk and the pyramid, ripped them from their usual context, re-examined and reassembled them into a new, contemporary, dynamic, and individual form. He reinterpreted the old and made it new. That is why I think it's the perfect metaphor for the modern student. This piece was privately funded and donated to the university. Newman made 3 versions of this exact work, one at the Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas, and one at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. In each situation, the work takes on a different meaning depending on its relationship to its site. Besides the minimalist work of Newman and figurative memorials, there are environmental works such as 9 Spaces, 9 Trees by Robert Irwin that invite the viewers to get inside them and experience them as a place rather than an object. Employing overlapping chain link fencing, creating a visual vibration known as the moire effect, the observer will perceive that people and objects will appear and disappear as they move through the spaces.
It looks like they're growing some trees. I have no idea. Maybe it's an art thing.
You think it's an art thing?
It could be.
This is a work by Robert Irwin, who's a conceptual artist who has made a number of pieces about one's perceptions and perceptions of everyday spaces.
It just reminds me of math. I'm a bioengineering major, so when I see, geometric shapes and stuff, I just think of math, not art. So
I think it has object qualities. I mean, you can certainly look at it from afar and take it in. It's difficult to do that, but you can see it in its entirety as an object. But it's also one that encourages interaction, and I often think of it as kind of a situation. He's created this place for us to come and have a break, take a moment to sit and eat your lunch, or just be immersed in it. So to me, it kind of is both of those things. It kind of exists in this other space, that it is an object and it's a space and it's a situation. So
when a commission work is meant to relate to its location, we call the work site-specific, and a great example of that can be found next to the university's physics building.
Students call this Mr. Peanut, or the bowling pin, but really it's a piece by Martin Puryear called Everything That Rises, and it's all about the pi orbital electron path. It's appropriately sited right next to the physics building, and one thing that's interesting about this, it's fabricated bronze, and the only industry that could make this shape for the artist was a beer keg manufacturer.
Downtown Seattle is an eclectic mix of business and the arts, tourists and residents, and the tallest sculpture in the city.
If you've ever been to Seattle, you've seen this piece. This is The Hammering Man by Jonathan Borofsky, and it's all about the worker toiling away. But this is the anonymous worker. He doesn't have a name. He's only got a number.
I think it's supposed to be a contribution to the working class. He's always working, he's always hammering. He's a busy guy.
Walker.
Looks like about 6 inches thick, which is a nice piece of steel. I know a little bit about steel.
Seattle's Hammering Man is one of a global series created by the artist. Giant hammering men are popping up in Europe and Asia, representing the universal worker in different countries and different economic systems. Successful public art often generates a variety of reactions and responses from the community, often in a satiric vein. And a local pub features what else but the Hammered Man.
This is Vertebrae by Henry Moore, one of the most popular sculptures in Seattle. Moore was a British artist whose career spanned most of the 20th century. He was fascinated by biomorphic shapes, which he abstracted to suit his aesthetics. In this piece, you can easily see his interest in bone shapes, and they're nestling bone shapes, like a family cuddling together. It's made of cast bronze, and it's hollow.
I love the natural lines of it and sort of biomorphic shapes compared to, the hard line of the buildings and the stark contrast to, this is business life downtown. So it's sort of nice to see that.
It's like jacks to me.
What do you mean?
Well, it looks like the thing the kids play with, the jacks.
Jacks, like
yeah,
you roll.
Throw them out there, yeah. The kids pick them up.
This piece was also the subject of a huge controversy in 1984. The work was owned by the bank that occupied the building at that time, so it was actually privately funded public art. But the bank had to sell some of its assets and threatened to sell the sculpture. This upset the community who loved the work, and they formed a sit-in protest of about 1,000 people who formed a ring around the piece and refused to let the bank sell it. This became one of the first times in public art history that a group protested to keep a work rather than get rid of a work. The bank ultimately donated the piece to the city, getting a huge tax write-off, consequently saving the bank from its financial troubles.
I know what you're thinking. We're standing in front of a pile of rocks. But this is a sculpture by Michael Heiser called Adjacent Against a Pond. This is a 40-ton granite boulder on top of a concrete plinth. This piece was the first piece commissioned by the newly formed Seattle Arts Commission in 1976, and it was hugely controversial. People said, "We paid money for this?"
Heiser is mostly known as an earthworks artist, an offshoot of minimalism. In the 1960s and 70s, artists tired of the slick New York City gallery scene went out into the desert of the American Southwest and created massive works using the earth instead of marble and bulldozers instead of chisels. This type of art is called non-objective art, meaning that it comes from the artist's imagination, not abstracted from something found in life.
This piece is all about the relationship between man and nature. We have these 40-ton granite boulders sitting on top of man-made concrete plinths. And as the concrete plinths become more complex, representing the evolution of man, the natural boulders become further removed. So on this one, we have a 3-sided concrete plinth, and the granite boulder is sitting right on top of it. That's the simplest one. This one is 4-sided. It's becoming more complex, and the granite boulder, the natural boulder, is sliding off of it. The third one, the last one, is the most complex concrete plinth. It's 5-sided, and it is the furthest removed from the natural boulder.
I actually like it. It looks like the rock's working towards a goal almost, trying to make it up onto the ledge if you take it one piece at a time.
Oh, interesting. So you read it from right to left. The rocks are climbing up.
Well, I guess if I was on the other side, I'd be reading it left to right. So.
Yeah, I guess it depends where you're viewing from. People's, maybe us interacting with nature or like the city in general. So I guess the city's up against, like close to the woods or something, and then it's next to it, and then it's right on top of it.
Fantastic. That's a great interpretation. So do you think that most of the public understands this the way you guys do?
Do we understand it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you guys have a pretty good grasp on it.
If Adjacent Against a Pond is about the interaction of man and nature, this next piece in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood is all about the interaction of people.
Excuse me, could you dance for us on these? Do you know how to use these?
Not a clue.
These are the dance steps on Broadway by Jack Mackey and Chuck Greening. They're all about the choreography of the street, how strangers walk by each other and don't relate. Jack wants to change that. So what you're seeing here is the rumba. These really work. If you follow the instructions, you'll be able to do the rumba. It's just a lot of fun. 4, 5, 6, 1. And then 5 is here.
Why did you say yes to this? Why?
Well, this is part of it. He's trying to figure out if this really works. 6.
I am not going to remember this.
You don't have to. The numbers are there for you.
They're there for
Okay.
me.
The dance steps on Broadway are meant to introduce interactivity on the street. In Seattle, we don't look at each other when we're on the street. We look down at our feet. It's raining. All we do is look at our feet. Jack's piece is trying to change that, to get you to look at each other, maybe dance with each other. One, 2, 3. Where's 4? You see 4?
Just north of the Ship Canal is Fremont, a neighborhood frequented by artists, freethinkers, and nonconformists. The public art, in what is often referred to as the Republic of Fremont, is characterized by its kitschy, campy, and cartoony approach. It is known for its tongue-in-cheek aesthetic. For example, you have this 7-ton bronze statue of Lenin striding vigorously away from the Taco Del Mar. It originally stood in a large public square in Poprad, Slovakia. Created by Slovakian artist Emil Venkov, it was relegated to the slag heap of history after the fall of communism in 1989 when Louis Carpenter, an English teacher from Issaquah, Washington, found and bought it. After shipping it home, Carpenter was tragically killed in a car accident in 1994. His family, not wanting to deal with this huge hunk of bronze in the backyard, loaned it to Fremont until a buyer could be found.
But this was also the point of a serious controversy. The Russian community was very upset when he was put into place. They said, our families had to leave our homeland because of this guy and his ideas. They also said, do you think the Jews would allow a statue of Hitler to be displayed here?
We made a trip to Russia, and you know, the Soviet Union is gone, so I think it's all right that it's here.
Yeah, fine. I'm from Seattle. I had never thought about the Russian thing, but because it's all tongue-in-cheek. It was Fremont. So in Fremont, you're not going to have Bugs Bunny.
I think the best thing we could do with this Lenin statue is to melt it down and put up a statue of John Lennon is what I would like to do, the guitarist, because a lot of people are aghast when they find out because of the oppression of the old Soviet Union and stuff, but I just think we got the wrong Lennon in Fremont.
Waiting for the Interurban was created by Richard Beyer in 1979, making it one of the early pioneering pieces of truly public art in Seattle. Rumor has it that the dog's human face belonged to Fremont's unofficial mayor at the time, who was opposed to the sculpture. It is outrageously popular among Seattleites, not because of its formwork, which is very crude, but because its theme is universal. We have all waited for the bus at some point in our lives. It is also much loved because a populist, impromptu Fremont custom evolved over this artwork.
But I do like that people take to it. They dress it up all the time. I always see different shirts or different streams on it or some form of colors all around it.
If you get there first in the early morning, you can dress it up for the day, for a birthday or an event or a game.
It just kind of adds to the public sphere. You know, when people are walking around, you know, it's cool to see people expressing themselves in this way, and I think it makes the city look better.
It's a real icon here in Fremont. It's because everyone uses it to celebrate events and things that are happening around Fremont. So it's I don't think it would be the same place that is Fremont without it.
I like the statues without the clothing and balloons on it.
Okay.
But with the balloons and clothing, I don't care for it.
So every time I pass that, depending on my mood, I have a different reaction to it. That's what art does for me. So I think it's definitely art.
So the question is this art or is this building jewelry? Whatever it is, it's intense.
It's not form follows function. It's got an element of decoration in it, but so do a lot of things.
One of the interesting things about this piece is the total integration of art with the architecture, and it's everywhere. Everyone knows the story of trolls. They hang under bridges and they take children off the tops and eat them, or goats. Well, this troll steals Volkswagens from the top of the Aurora Bridge.
In 1990, the Fremont Arts Council called for proposals, in part to solve a serious social problem. This area under the bridge had become a gathering place for the homeless and drug dealers. Artists were asked to come up with creative solutions. Generally, public art is chosen by a hand-picked, art-educated committee of architects, local artists, and civic leaders. The council turned the process on its head and let the public vote on scale models during the Fremont Fair. The Troll, a collaboration by Steve Bedanes, Will Martin, Donna Walter, and Ross Whitehead, is the only truly democratically selected piece of public art in the city. This is another example of a wildly popular public artwork without overt, serious conceptual intent. It's all about fun and interactivity with a sense of humor. This lack of seriousness has also made it controversial. Is it art or a cartoon? Its success did have the desired effect. The homeless, drug dealers, and illegal garbage dumpers have been displaced out of the site. Now, it's a lovable landmark. So public art can be fun or it can be serious, representational or abstract, useful, whimsical, popular or controversial. Look for public art where you live and ask yourself, you call that art? I'm John Young. Let's go find some.